I said before that one of the things that I love about practice is you really get to meet your game design heroes, and Rob Daviau is really one of those for me. He's going to give you a more detailed bio, but just to say that playing Risk Legacy, a project that he did with while he was working at Hasbro, it really blew my mind as a game designer and made me think about the physical object of board games, the ways that narratives don't have to be within a game, but can ripple outwards from the experience of a game. A board game that reconfigures the notion of social community around a group of players, and in so many ways rethinks what game design is and what games can be, but still within a kind of classical form of a multiplayer, what Richard Garfield would call ortho game, a competitive, a straightforward game. So I leave you in Rob Daviau's good hands. Let's please welcome him, Rob Daviau.
Thank you, Eric. Can everyone hear me? All right. You made my mom's day. She's in the audience, so thank you for that. Which means you all have to be nice to me during the Q&A. Now, a quick question. How many people, show of hands, are either sitting in the same seat or tried to sit in the same seat they sat in this morning? Why? It's your seat. It's an interesting social convention. One of the things I'm going to talk about for the next 40 minutes is about assumptions. What are the assumptions that people have when they go to play a game? What are the assumptions about a game, and how can you break those assumptions? I've scheduled my talk a little bit differently. I was looking at the other talks that were coming up, and before and after, and I didn't want to hit exactly the same thing. So I'm going to talk specifically about permanence in games, more importantly, how to balance a board game that is designed to permanently change. So I would like to call it how to spend 4 times longer designing your games so your players end up as intentional co-designers. Therefore, personally, they're experienced, but not in a way they break it and think you're an idiot. That's the longer version. But a quick moment about me. That's me. That's my Twitter handle. That's kind of what I do. I spent 14 years at Hasbro Games. That's Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley, not Wizards of the Coast, although they're all owned by the same giant corporation. These are a few of the games that I designed, co-designed, or developed while I was there. There are a few dozen more. I didn't think this group would care as much about Trouble, Cars 2, or some of those many Trivial Pursuit games. So I did Heroescape, which was a tabletop miniatures game. I did a game, Epic Duels, Star Wars battling game. Betrayal and House of the Hill was my favorite game I worked on up until I worked on Risk Legacy. Number of Clue things, and there was a big fad in the middle of last decade where I made games with DVDs in them. So I totally have digital experience because I'm all about this. But the game that Eric was talking about, and the reason I'm here today, is in 2011 I came out with Risk Legacy, and if all goes well, in 2014 I'll be coming up with its spiritual successor called SeaFall. The 2014 depends on how well playtesting goes in the next couple weeks. I just put the next version in players' hands. How many people have heard of Risk Legacy? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly then go over some of the things that made Risk Legacy, but since most of you know it, I'll be very brief. The idea behind a legacy game is that some of the actions you take in one game have permanent effects in future games. The game has sort of a meta state that carries through, and that can include writing on the board, putting permanent stickers on the board, in the case of Risk Legacy, naming continents, upgrading the cards with stickers, upgrading the factions themselves, and even destroying cards. Now, it doesn't call in the rules to burn them, but I found this online and I appreciated the person's enthusiasm for destroying the cards. The stickers are permanent. The marker is permanent. It is a one-way trip. I'll get in really quickly why I made these, how I came up with it, why I made these decisions, and what I discovered about balancing the game on the way. So it was definitely an unexpected idea. I didn't set out and say, I'm going to do something completely different here. I just happened to be in a brainstorm at Hasbro for Clue, and there was sort of a methodology, and it's not some sort of secret sauce type thing, but I thought it was worth sharing here that really works for me, which is Working on a new project, you make all the assumptions you can about that project, from the most obvious to the most unexpected, and you just physically write them down. We all have assumptions like, I sit in the same seat I sat in this morning, because it's your seat, of course you would. And then you start saying, what if? And you turn them on their head and you start challenging, why is this an assumption? Why are we designing games this way? Is it because we've always designed them this way? And can we do it differently? In a lot of cases, the answer is no, it's an awful idea. Right? You need to know the difference. But in some cases, it can spark very interesting thinking between what the genre sort of expects and what it actually really needs. And they're not always the same thing. I'm going to do a quick sample. I got worker placement. Everyone familiar with worker placement games or enough? It's a type of board game where you've got a worker, usually a little wooden meeple, and you put it on the board to activate an action. I want my guy to, this is based, Lords of Waterdeep is based on D&D. I want my guy to go get thieves. So I put my marker on there, and then I take 2 cubes, and no one else can go on that spot. And there's a number of games that have this. So I sat down and said, okay, what are some assumptions about worker placement games? And this is what I sort of came up with in a couple minutes, and I might use if I ever did a worker placement game to start saying, what can I do differently? A lot of writing there, but you place your own workers. Your workers work for free. How come you're not paying your workers? I mean, they're not really workers if you don't pay for them. They only take one action. There can only be one worker space. And you kind of go on and you sort of come up with these assumptions. You want to place your workers. That's a good thing. Worker placement game, why wouldn't it be? What if it was bad to place your workers? What if you wanted to hold them back? Second one from the bottom, your workers do whatever you say. Why don't they have free will? Why aren't your workers a little bit more interested in doing their thing? How about you ask about them, what they're going on in their life? So, and then I started thinking some more radical ones, like your workers like working for you. You're the best boss in the world. They'll do whatever you say. You don't work for them. They don't quit on you. They won't murder anyone in the street. I mean, you send them down to the bad part of town to talk to thieves, things can go wrong, right? They could actually murder someone and get thrown in jail. So you start going down these chains of thoughts, which again, oftentimes ends up, like if you look at the last one, really strange places. Your workers won't fall in love, marry, and start a rival business to go against you. So I was at a Clue brainstorm and we were writing down these assumptions. I mean, really came down to that I kind of pointed out that you would think Colonel Mustard would do it 1/6 of the time because that's math. I swear the guy does it like 2/3 of the time. If you don't know and you're near the end of the game, you're like, it was mustard. And you really got a better than 50% chance. That's my so I started saying, why are we inviting Mustard to the dinner party every night? The guy just is a killer, like a serial murder spree. And then and then I had this moment, I'm like, well, but the game doesn't know that. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Why are games Groundhog Day? Isn't it an assumption that when you play a board game and you put it away, you can take it out and it's completely fresh and your kids can do it. You can sort of grant it down through time like a relic in your game. Like, here you go, here's my Clue game. Nothing's changed, none of the cards are bent. It's just as you are, it's perfect. And it will be infinitely replayable. But yet it's supposed to be different every time you play. So it's supposed to be completely the same and completely different because you shuffle the cards and you do things different. It's like other forms of entertainment don't ask this. I don't finish a book and then pick it up a week later, but it's the same book. Like, what the hell, right? Or I don't see a movie and then when I see it again, get upset it's the same movie. And then other things like video games, you finish them. Hey, I solved it. Here you go. I finished it. I'm done. Your turn. And that's okay too. And like when you eat a meal, it goes away if you do it right. It's... And so, the board games live in this weird sort of world where there's assumptions. And so I wrote down a couple assumptions, which is what if a game doesn't fully return to its start state every time? And what if one game could affect the next? It was, I think Warren has mentioned this morning, I'm just trying to get back to playing D&D in the early 80s, right? And so all of my design ends up being there. So I'm like, can this bring story? Can this bring narrative? What could this do? So I had this idea, and at first I applied it to Clue. It was going to be some sort of serial murder, usual suspects, like Colin Mustard. It had to be him. Question him first. Hasbro wanted no part of that, so I let it lie dormant for like a year, and then brought it back for Risk. And really, what was I trying to do here? I was trying to tell a story. So if you're doing permanent change to a game, I can take that game out years later, or someone can come over and I can point to it and say, this happened here, this happened here. And the analogy I always made is, the Great Wall of China is still there. Right? It didn't go away when there was no longer a threat. Like, threat's over, tear it down. I mean, some cases that happened, but our world has a history based on decisions that people made that carried through and then did other ones. I wanted a group to really own their game. I wanted my game to be different from your game, and I wanted you to have a sense of ownership. I wanted to codify that, remember that time. Hey, remember that time when you rolled like 18 sixes in a row? Because it's Risk and it's heavily swingy with luck. And you held off my entire army? Well, we all say it, but the game doesn't ever record it. There's no Alamo that people go to remember this, this state. And I challenged myself because I thought there was no way I was going to be able to do it. And so it was just like this sort of thing to see if I could, well, actually, to see if I could make it, which I felt pretty good about, but then to see if I could get it through Hasbro and onto the shelves, which I felt like I had no chance. That's a story, unfortunately, for later. So why Permanence? Question I get a lot from people is, well, you could make it color forms and you could make it pencil. And I've seen people online go through, they will spend $150 in craft supplies not to rebuy a $50 game. Not because it's saving money, but they're really bothered by the idea of permanent change of game. And I get that, right? I mean, it's like, I don't walk around my house scribbling on the walls, right? It's not like I'm this sort of rebel, I'm Banksy and I'm just gonna, Someone put on Twitter right before I started, they're wondering if I had a presentation or if I was using to Sharpie the screen, right? Like it's not what I do, So why did I choose this? And the answer that I had, the first one is, if you play board games, you're doing this already. You're likely to play a board game more than once, and you're likely to play with the same people or similar people time after time. And when you do, you sit down and you say, oh, remember that time when he did this? Or don't let Eric win because he always plays that. Or I'm always green. Or, don't team up with him. Or you stab me. You have a permanent narrative within your board games, either within a game or within a group. The game just wasn't paying attention and catching up. So I'm like, can I have the game be just a reflection of what is already happening above the board? This ups the stakes. As soon as you ask someone to spend money and then write on it, it makes it real. It's like playing poker with real money, right? As opposed to, well, we'll just play for bottle caps and it doesn't really, and then firsthand people are like, I'm all in. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't care about this stuff. So if you make them care, it just adds a little bit of tension, which changes the tone and ultimately make your world real and unique, right? Whatever you do will sort of be there forever. And quite honestly, it scared the hell out of me. So I didn't think that it made a lot of sense and I just wanted to check it out. So I'm gonna take a little side journey here and point out that board games are not actually that special. And I don't mean they're not special to play and they're not special to make, they don't do a thing. What you're buying is not special. For $15, you can get this. And I know everyone in this room, oh, Monopoly, right? Take a little side thing. Monopoly's not a horrible game. This is just a total side thing this morning. It's a perfectly mediocre game that everyone hates because it gets too much attention from people who don't like games. There are far worse games. I've made probably worse games than these. It's also 80 years old. So if you look at just about any type of design, it's probably evolved in 80 years. But anyway, so $15 gets you this, which is a cardboard box with a bunch of stuff in it that if you liked Monopoly, you would treat very sacredly. And you wouldn't get anything on it, you wouldn't touch it, and keep the food away from it. $15 can also get you a pizza, which is the same cardboard box filled with stuff you eat, and then you throw away the box. Probably the pizza costs a little bit more to make than Monopoly. But we have this assumption, like sitting in your chair, that cardboard and plastic is special. It's not special. The experience is special. The design is special. The materials themselves are just a way to convey that to people. It took me about 10 years to get over that working at Hasbro because I wouldn't have thought that way. But eventually you make enough games and you rip them apart and you realize they're things, right? The physical cardboard doesn't mean anything. We will recycle gallons of cardboard a week, all of us, but not touch a game. So it's a very interesting assumption. So why Risk? Risk is a flashpoint. I've heard so many people online say, yeah, it's nice, but it's Risk. And I get that. Like, it's a game that a lot of people play and then a lot of people grow up from. I played it, now I've moved on. Well, that's exactly the point that I wanted. It's known. With Risk Legacy, I was doing some radical things, and I wanted to say to people, hey, if you win a game, you can name a continent, and then it'll give you +1 army for whenever you control it. 95% of my audience knew what I was talking about, and pretty much everyone in this room knows what I'm talking about. So it allowed sort of this sense of, I know what you're doing, and now I can focus on the new stuff. It's also solved. People like to say they know how to win Risk, or at least have certain strategies, so I wanted to mess with them there. It was a Hasbro brand. Hasbro was barely going to let me do this, but if I'm like, I got this crazy idea where you write on stuff and I need to come up with a whole new game brand to do it, never would have worked. I had done 6 or so Risk games. I kind of knew what levers you could pull in the game. Like I did tried things in various co-brands. And Risk, out of all the games that Hasbro makes, has the biggest metagame. My brother in 2000 stabbed me on the second turn in Risk on Christmas Day for no reason. I said, why are you doing that? He's like, I don't know. I said, I thought we were cool here. He's like, no. I said, you're not going to win. He's like, I just wanted to do it. We haven't played since because he's not a big game guy and he lives across the country. Actually, he lives in New York now. We should play. Second turn, if we ever play again, I'm stabbing him. Right? Risk already has the metagame. So that's all background that leads, okay, so if I'm going to design a game where you're going to make permanent changes and you're going to ask people to tear things up, and it's a one-way trip very consciously, how do you balance this? How do you make it so the choices that people make don't end up with a game that's unplayable because either one person wins all the time or it's so unfun that no one wants to play it again? And here is the short version. You don't. So, thank you. Are there any questions? Actually, the key for me was recognizing that it couldn't be balanced, at least not by me. There was no way I could put a game out that had balance and ask people to make changes to their game. One had to give, and the answer is I can't come out with balance. I can come out with a game that starts balanced. And then that led me to say, I never finished the design to a legacy game. And when I say never, I've done 1.5. So basically, they're shipped 80% done. I design the engine, I design the beginning of the game, and then I give the tools to the players to finish the last 20%, not as designers, but as players. You play the game, and you unconsciously finish the design by adding, oh, this faction needs to be a little more powerful. Oh, this continent's kind of out of control. We should, put some negative things on it. Gamers will balance it themselves, and by basically putting the rules in to balance it to complete it while they're playing, I'm also giving them the chance to balance it while they're playing. And the analogy I like to use is psychohistory. Everyone familiar with Isaac Asimov's Foundation? Basically, the theory of this guy says you can't predict what one person will do in the future, but you can predict what large groups of people will do in the future. And I realized after this was a kind of a similar thought, which is I don't know what any one group's going to do, but I can kind of predict that most groups this will happen. And as long as I put the tools in to fix it, the group should be able to fix it at that point. It's another reason why this game caps at about 15 games. The further you played it, the less vision I had as to what was going to fly out of control. Therefore, the better chance it would go out of balance. 15 somewhat arbitrary. I wanted it long enough to feel epic, but not so long that it felt completely daunting. Maybe 12 would have been better. I don't know. 15 feels about right. So there's permanent levers that I could use to pull to balance this, right? All the things that you would expect in a Risk game. So let's go through how I managed to screw this up, and then through playtesting and friends, get it right at the end. So first thing I had is this awesome idea of random permanence. You start playing the game and I'm like, you roll 3 6s, something gets nuked. That's going to be awesome, right? Bang, 6s are powerful in Risk, it gets nuked. This was like the worst idea I had, and I played with it for months, which is if you're going to make a permanent change to the game, every decision has to be in the player's hands. They may not understand the full consequences of it, at least not right away, but they have to make that decision. Otherwise, there was too little control on my part because I realized turn one, like, hey, let's play this new game. I'm attacking you. I roll 3 6s. We've just nuked part of the board. We've rolled the dice once, and now the game is completely... I had no control over when these things were going to come out. So it was actually my friend Craig Van Ness, who I worked with at Hasbro, who's a co-designer, pointed out quite correctly that this should always be in the player's hands. So instead, now they're on cards. You get a card at the beginning of the game. It has a sticker on it. You choose when to play it, if to play it, and where to play it. And by doing this, you get basically put in charge of short versus long-term decision making. So if you could see this board right here, there's 2 stickers and 2 cities. There's a story here. Someone put a sticker, someone put a city. The players made these decisions without getting, basically cities act as deterrents, things you either want to go around or go through. The one to the south in Central America is a mercenary. That will give you 1 extra troop, but then right to the north at Area 51 is a biohazard, which means it drains 1 troop every turn, forever. Right, there's a biohazard there. And that star shape is a capital, which means someone put their capital in a place that is draining their troops, or more probably they placed their capital and then on turn 2 someone put a biohazard there to try to get them. I also fell in love with gimmicks without a point. So I was like, you can write on the board and record winners, and you can name continents, and you can name cities. And I was so excited and jazzed up about this, and then playtesters were like, why do I want to do that? I mean, you asked me to write on the board with no purpose. Now, I could do a whole separate talk about how powerful naming is towards ownership, and I did serve some purpose, but I realized I was missing an opportunity to add more game balancing things there. So looking at them again, you record the winners. Winners get certain bonuses for winning games, which, as a reminder from a game balancing point of view, if at the beginning of the game you get 1 missile for every time you've won. If I've won 5 times and everyone else in my group has won 1, before the game starts, I have just reminded everyone that I am more powerful and should be taken down. And it reminds the players, this is how you balance it, get robbed. By naming a continent, the idea of giving you a +1, if you own it, now has a reason to name the continent. You can pick your favorite spot. It also gives a reason for people to blow it up because they know you like it. And then the last one is you name a city, and if you won the game and it's a major city, which has a 2 in there, only you can start there in future games, which again claims your starting spot, which is good, and also gives a chance for people to put biohazards and blow it up, right? So the game constantly is, I get this advantage, the rest of the players are now responsible for removing that advantage from me. I also didn't change enough at the beginning. I was afraid of my own idea, so I just changed a few things. Which meant the things that did change actually were overly powerful because there was no way to do it. So instead, I probably tripled the amount of things that changed, but made them all less powerful, which meant that it was a series of micro changes, which always kept the thing from wobbling out of control. Not always, hopefully. But this added a lot more chaos to the system. And basically, I ran into the problem, it was too much too soon. In the first version, or by the time I got to this version of the game, you had 4 types of scars, you had this, you had faction powers, you could do all this stuff on your turn, and the analogy I like to make was, there we go, here's a box of matches, kid, have a good time. People would, in game 1, make so many permanent changes that they would actually ruin their game because they didn't see how the consequences would play out. And they were so caught up in the moment of doing it that it was all short-term and no long-term. And it was also the type of thing where you ripped open all your Christmas presents in the first 8 minutes and then you sit there winded wondering where Christmas is, right? It was we get to do all these changes. Oh, we did it. Now it's game 3 and we don't have any changes because we did them all. Which led to sort of the other tentpole that the Legacy game, or at least Risk Legacy has, which is that I took some content and locked it up. It's like downloadable content or an expansion built into the game, but instead of going out and buying it, you earn it by achieving certain things. And this resulted in a tremendous amount of narrative opportunity, which I liked and players liked. It also provided these real exciting moments. There was a study that I learned at Hasbro through MIT that the most exciting part of playing a board game is opening the box. They did skin conductivity. That's when people were the most excited. Then they had to read the rules, and that's where fun went to die. And then they kind of took their first couple turns and it was exciting. And then depending how good the game was, they got more and more excited, but never as excited as they were when the box was open. So you put lots of little games in there and you get to recreate the excitement of opening the box. But this didn't come out of any of that. This came out of the idea of, I had to take some of these toys away from people so that they could see the results of what they were doing, and so that when you got something in game 8, you could say, oh, finally, we've got some of these biohazard scars. Now we can get Eric because he keeps winning. Everyone, you know what to do with these stickers. Was that you? Were you really winning a lot?
Right in the middle.
Yeah. So the reason those were in there were absolutely from the idea to sort of titrate these permanent changes so people had time to play them, integrate them, see what happened. Oh, I really wish I hadn't done that in game 1. It didn't break the game, but I wouldn't do that again if I had the opportunity, and then I give them a new opportunity, and hopefully they've learned and they use it for good, or for their good, if at the harm of someone else. So some of the things that went right through fortune or skill or some combination is using a solved game like Risk, as I mentioned before, was very good. People understood what these changes were going to do to the Risk game. I made it so players didn't own factions. There's 5 factions in the game, possibly more. And it's been 2 years. I have to start being able to talk about what's in those packets. By not having people own factions, you never wanted to make any one faction too powerful when you did own it, because there was no chance you were going to own it again. So that was necessary. Randomness was bad. Unpredictability is good. I wanted to keep people well away from the mastery curve on here, because I already started out with Risk going, I know Risk. I played 40 games of Risk. I played growing up. I wanted to kind of keep, every time you unlock something, okay, this is new information. These are new rules. I got to integrate this, which always meant that you were sort of analyzing the game with a fresh set of eyes, which meant you were really paying attention to it. Introducing a draft, which is just a mechanism to make sure that no one person beginning a game ended up with the best faction and the best starting place and the most, this and that. It kind of gets spread out. I liked pulling, this doesn't have as much to do with balance. Actually, these last couple are just weird stuff I put in there that kind of relate to balance, but actually relate to engagement. Cliffhangers, what I discovered by accident is when you end a game and you open a new packet, it's just like, come back next week and see how these rules work. And instead of being like, oh, we got to learn new rules, it turned out like, we get to learn new rules, look at this. And so it kept engagement level higher than I expected it would. Matter of fact, I completely underestimated how exciting those packs were going to be. I expected them to be opened in bits and pieces over 15 games, and I still know a lot of groups like, we all collaborated and we opened all of them in 4 games. I'm like, oh, you weren't supposed to do that. But like, with SeaFall, I'm really trying to pay attention that it's a little bit, the mystery box is alluring, and I have to be careful, or at least be aware that people are going to do everything to open them. I put something in there which I'll get to in a minute, which was a pure gimmick, but actually resulted in a meta game, which kept people talking about the game, which kept them paying attention to the game. And actually, and then the last thing I'll talk about is the unboxing itself. I tried to turn into a ritual to let people know what they're about to do was a little bit different, which would also weed out the people who couldn't tear up a card. Like, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, I'm out. They don't have to play the game, and they're done. So I don't know, does anyone know about this, the do not ever? Underneath the vac tray in the box is an envelope that says do not open ever, and it's not written anywhere in the game, and it never tells you what to do with it. And this came out of me joking for like a year that I was going to put an envelope in there called do not open until instructed, but then never instruct people to do it. And I realized I would kill some gamers, right? Like, they would go through the rule book so many times and go online. I'm like, and then people kept saying, well, you should really do it. And so I switched the wording. And then one of my friends said, well, people are just going to look online and see what's in it and then decide. So there's actually 4 random ones that are in there. Some are good and some are bad. So I can't even tell you what's in yours if you have it or whether you should open it or not. So it became a little and what I've loved is all the house rules that came out of this. People are going to open after the 15th game. We're going to open it when we get a unanimous vote. We're going to open it when everyone has come up with their own version of it. I'm telling you not to open it. It's bad stuff in there. And as a side, there's an interesting psychological thing. If you bought an expansion for a game and you didn't like it, you're like, hey, should we play with and this isn't one of them, should we play with the nuclear winter option? No, I don't like it. Okay. But if I put the nuclear winter option in there and you open it, you're like, well, fair is fair. It said do not open, and we did, so now we have to use it. It's like, no, you don't. You absolutely do not have to use it. But because everyone agreed, like, we're doing this, and this is for real, and it gave it this importance that it wouldn't have normally, then people are like, well, we got to do it now. And then the last thing is the unboxing itself. What I call Game Zero, and I'm still trying to figure out in SeaFall. It's a way to introduce the game to people and let them know these are the types of decisions you're going to have to make. This is what it's going to be like. This is what the tone of the game is. So the box was going to be closed with a sticker. I can print on a sticker, so I just printed that. No, what's done can never be undone. So we've all opened stickers on boxes plenty of times, but now you're breaking a seal, right? And it was, okay, the picture that's on here, there isn't a picture on it. The next thing is you have to sign the back of the board saying, you take responsibility for what's about to happen. And then you take, I don't even remember how many it is, 10 or so cards, 12 or so cards right now, and you put random coins on them so you can decide how your world has more powerful places or not. The more coins on a card, the more valuable that territory. And I deliberately in the game did not give any particular way to do it, because I wanted people to have an investment in doing it right for their group right away, like balancing it for their group. We're okay on time. And then the last thing you do is you take every faction, and every faction has a choice of 2 powers. And you pick one of the powers, and you tear up the other one. Now, a little secret, there's pretty much an obvious choice of which power is better, but they're both fine. This is largely a meaningless decision, other than I'm asking you to rip up a card. And so it's just the commitment to, and again, people have come up with their own systems, and by getting the group involved in what's fair, it sets the pace for them making those right decisions as you go down. And what's fair is not necessarily like I'm trying to do some sort of commune game design. It's that in any game, like if someone's winning, the other people often and should gang up against them to prevent them from winning, because hopefully they want to win. So this just happens at the meta level, which is like, this person's winning a lot of games. How can we shape the world to handicap them in this world or remove the advantages that they've built? So I wanted that in people's heads at the beginning. So in summary, how do you balance 15 games? And the answer is you can't with these permanent, but the players can if you give them the right tools. But they don't always do a good job of it. And in fact, I've discovered, and one of the things I'm trying not to do differently in SeaFall is some of it mess them up completely. I'll see online, we're on game 11 and someone's won 9 times and 2 other people have won once and 2 people haven't won at all. And they're like, how did that happen? Well, we don't feel right ganging up or picking on them. So they have basically not realized that the game is deliberately asymmetrical. Everyone does not start every game on equal footing. Some people start with an advantage. In baseball terms, some teams have a larger payroll. Some people start with more money at the poker table. If you aren't consciously aware of that and you treat everything as equal and you don't basically form alliances and factions against someone who has an advantage, your game can go out of balance. This was kind of a live and learn experience, so I'm really trying in my next one to do it differently. And I'm going to take just a few minutes to talk about my next game, kind of get into a meaty design problem, and I apologize to my mother in advance for this.
Also, can I just mention that you've left Hasbro?
I have left Hasbro.
You now started your own company called Ironwall. You're doing game design consulting and also making original games.
Yeah, I left Hasbro about a year ago. They moved my job 100 miles from my kids. I tried it for a year. It didn't work financially, emotionally. I left. I consult now, mostly back to Hasbro, but other game companies, and I'm spending, it's fine. So I get to do basically my same job, but make up my own stuff, so without health insurance. But other than that, it's... SeaFall is a different type of game. If Risk is looking at a known world and figuring out how to change it, SeaFall is a game I'm working on which is loosely based on an Age of Sail exploration, which is looking at an unknown world and figuring out what's out there and how you react when you find it. So one of my designs inspiration is this Mitsubishi ad, if you look at the truck in the lower corner. But it's the idea of the unknown and the sense of wonder that was faced by people in the 16th and 17th century of what is around the corner, what am I going to find there, whether it's mundane or exciting, and will I make it back home again? So a big part of this is starting the game with an empty ocean and having people find islands, which you think I would have locked down right at the beginning, because that's what the game's about. But I'm going to take you through, because I kept all my design notes, everything I tried, and sort of very fast paced. So what I wanted was people to find islands, but not too quickly. There's 8 to 12 islands in the game. If you found them all in game 2, what are you doing with the rest of your game? So I had to sort of, again, slow it down. I wanted it to be a path to victory. I didn't want finding islands to be what you did to lose while other people won. And I wanted research to lead to greater success, but not guaranteed chance of success. I also didn't want blind luck, which in reality is what finding an island really is out in the ocean, but or pure skill, just because if it's like I have calculated exactly that there's an island here, that's a little dry for a game about, fantasy or fantastical adventure. And I didn't want it to be a huge letdown if you don't find one, where you spend half the game looking for one and then you get a bad dice roll and you go, oh, I just wasted my game. So at first I had this great Carcassonne idea where you were going to get different tiles and you were going to build edges of continents and islands. I love it as a concept. I realized I wouldn't have control over this. Very quickly you were going to run into coastlines that didn't make sense and islands that ended with giant flat green walls and one giant continent in the middle. Like, it was absolutely too uncontrollable for me. So I went to this, which is all of these graphics are my prototype graphics. There's a grid with islands, and you can see that there's a hex grid, and there's one island in every column. And if I just come up with a rule that there can only be one island in every column, it'll force people to go west further and further from their homeland, so you don't end up with a giant cluster and then the empty ocean out there. But it still allows clumping, just not all in the same column. So without getting too much in the game design, because I like to take questions, I'm just going to go through. I went through this idea that I was kind of doing a deck building game like a Dominion, but your deck building lasted from game to game. This proved to be, don't do this. That's all I'm going to get into. But the idea is that you would keep track, different cards would have land symbols on it, so you would have to kind of memorize people's decks, and when you went to look for an island, you would draw cards from any deck, yours or others, and if you found, it became this card counting, it was awful, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that, but I'm sort of going to do that, which is, oh, you draw as many cards equal to your ship's luck. Lucky ships find islands more often. That's kind of cool. It was still card counting. Then I just gave up on the whole deck building thing and went to an action system. So you explore the sea as an action you pick, and you're still looking, based on your ship's luck. And then I realized that I was doing the exact same thing I did with Risk Legacy, is you can't control your ship's luck, and card draws are blind. So I'm making permanent change from actions you can't control. I'm not giving players control over the game. So I ran away from that, went to a dice pool system, which still has luck, but some predictability bell curve luck. I'm not afraid of dice. I don't mind swingy sort of things. And you can, the more dice you put in, the better chance of success. So you were basically could calculate, I know that Brad doesn't like to do math in his games, but you could calculate the probability somewhat of finding it. There were pieces of a map that could, it kind of went on from there. Then I said, nah, I'm going to make a whole separate mini game, even though this was pretty much where I've ended up. Where you put tokens down and you go on a map, and you can see you look at the rules expanding over here. This is how not to design. And then so you would be like random paths that you would travel on in a ship. It was almost like this abstraction of let's zoom in and see how the ship's doing. And if you got to the end, you found an island, which made it kind of stretched it out and added some drama. And then I made the searching board look prettier. And I gave players the chance to put down the tokens. So I could look, and so I would know where the safe path was to the island, and you could put down tokens in my way to try to stop me. And I was all jazzed up about this. I thought this was it. Now remember, board games, I can't be there to teach it. So when I sat down to write the rules to give it to playtesters, these notes turned into this. And I'm like, yes, this is it. This is simple and clear. And everyone's going to want to run out and memorize this and explore an island. You've got 10 other things to do, which are one paragraph, but damn it, this is what you're going to get involved with. I was shocked that the playtesters didn't like it. So we've kind of gone back to a very similar system, which is, you can see now that there's numbers. Those are the numbers that you have to roll with a giant dice pool. And you can build up your ships and give yourself a better. So as you go west, they get harder. So now I can say, you can try to sail out to the edge of the world in game one where there's a 200, but you will waste your time, but you know that. And then I added map cards back in, which is, if you don't like dice, you can buy a lot of maps, which are like fixed die rolls. So you can rely on luck, you can rely on skill, you can prepare. And the only thing that we did differently for the last version we put out is, at the end, you were going to have a big empty board with 12 islands. And that wasn't quite enough. And also, when you failed, you felt like I went out and I rolled in that 5% of the bell curve and it didn't work and I'm really bummed. I want a consolation prize. And so I didn't mind that. So we're just introducing now that if you fail your roll for an island, you still find something. It may not be good. You may be attacked by pirates. You may find some dangerous waters or a current, or just, you can find like a little atoll out there that you can name. You can't search it. It doesn't grow anything, but you found a rock and you can write your name on the board, and so you feel good about it. So that's what we're play testing now, with the idea here is that your world that you explore will look different from other people. I've given more control back between a combination of dice pool, which are easier to get but more swingy, and cards, which are very predictable. You can control where in the column it goes. So you can put them next to other islands or far away from islands. And the board will develop with currents and dangerous waters and things in places that you want to avoid. So the space between the islands is no longer the thing you just do to get to the interesting place, but will be interesting in and of itself. So those are some of the things that I'm doing in the board game space. I left 15 minutes. I went a little over, but that's me. And I think we're going to take questions now.
Thank you, Rob. It's so enlightening and refreshing to hear a really detailed case study, I think. I'm going to ask you just one question before we throw it open to the audience, and that is, in thinking about this morning's sort of issues that are themes that are starting to emerge about designing choice, but specifically about systems, let's say, versus experience, player experience. I think one of the things that you showed is that doesn't necessarily have to be a dichotomy, right? That what's fascinating about what you did in Risk Legacy is that you are expressing things like world building on the narrative side. You are expressing players' individual identity. You are building a kind of shaping a social contract around a game in terms of you are creating a space for metagaming, right? And all of these things kind of with a narrative flavor, right? And so what's interesting is that I think that it's important for us as designers to put on our hat where now we're a storyteller, now we're a writer, now we're a psychologist, now we're a mathematician thinking about the systems and logic. But I think that in a successful game, that all of that stuff kind of is in the service of each other, and it's less about a dichotomy. So I think that the systems that you design, sometimes they're tight, sometimes they're wild, right? This sort of wildly unpredictable.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how they sort of all integrate together to become expressive and create an experience for players. So I'd like you to reflect a little bit on the talks this morning.
And I was going to mention that at the top of the talk, but I wanted to get through all my slides, which is, I was thinking a lot about the talks this morning about emergent design and narrative design, and I realized in the tabletop space, meaning I thought about it for a couple hours off and on, I could never design a tight narrative to a game because board games inherently have unpredictability. There's no, if I give you a completely scripted scenario, I don't know what that is. I'm not sure it's a tabletop game, so I can't. What I can give you is a narrative toolbox, because I always consider myself a storyteller, which is the players are always going to write the story themselves through play. Some games will give you more of a narrative toolbox than others. If you're playing an abstract tile-laying game, you're playing the math, and that's fine. You're not asking for more than that. If you're playing a war game, a board game, a miniatures game, it inherently has a narrative that most players, consciously or unconsciously, will fill in. And I always try to design my games that if I read the write-up the next day, and I gave it to someone who didn't know it was a game, they might think it was a book or a movie. That I like the narrative story to be the thing you talk about the next day, not I got a majority of red cubes, so I got the bonus for most red cubes. And
yeah, it's interesting, and it's such a like to use Keith's phrase, it's such a razor's edge between those two, between that idea of where that subtle emphasis is between where the discussion of system becomes something else. It transforms into a discussion of the narrative of the world, or the identity of the players.
And to your point, Risk Legacy is not an elegant game at all.
It's not a what game?
Elegant. If you open everything up and then explained it from game one, everything was in there, it's a big sloppy mess. And what I was trying to do was not create elegance, but create unpredictable narrative by throwing in unexpected mechanics at unexpected times and then causing people to react to them. I'm jokingly always say that I'm making like a Yes album from 1972, like 8-minute tuba solo, go, and like.
But I think that's such a great point, because I think Keith's idea of value from the last panel is really interesting and important, however you want to frame what value is. But I think there's many ways to get there, and elegance is one way, but somehow the lack of elegance in Risk Legacy works because the players sort of own it, right? Because they own it, because it comes to them piecemeal, because they're assembling the game. It's just a different set of aesthetic criteria. It creates its own criteria. That's kind of what's so fascinating. And last thing I just want to say, it's kind of mind-blowing how important D&D has been to sort of you and Warren and on the systems and the narrative side. Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things I love about the Trail at the House on the Hill is how it really captures that sense of the unknown, that's at the center of horror, right?
Yep.
From building the house at the beginning to what's going to be behind it all at the end. I'm wondering, is there a genre that is driving the new game the way horror seems to drive the Trail?
A genre driving which game? SeaFall?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same sense of wonderment. I don't know if you saw it at the beginning, but Betrayal on House of the Hill is a game I did design and development for. It was another inventor who came up with a brilliant idea of the haunts and things, but I actually did switch it around to be that the rooms you were going in were unknown, his original unknown. The way he had it at the beginning is you had him in your hand and you played him as tiles. Like, oh, here's the kitchen. We want to find it. I'm like, that never happens in horror movies, right? It's like, who's got the kitchen? I do. Okay, let's go there, right? And so I shifted it around to make that unknown, and I'm still playing with that idea of unknown. I mean, I design games emotionally and thematically, not in some sort of dissertation way. It's just where I start from, and then I fight to find mechanics that will fit that. SeaFall, from a thematic point of view, is how are you as an empire going to react to the unknown? How are you as a player, and therefore you as an empire to do it? If you meet a group of natives on an island, do you trade with them, or you're like, this stuff's mine, and then you burn it to the ground? And I wanted both options to be viable paths to victory and both options to have consequences in there. So it becomes sort of this series of how sort of these dominant cultures interact with unknown things and what that means to them as they play. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now. And I want it to feel, I said to my co-publisher, he said, what's your next game? And I said, Indiana Jones in the 16th century. He's like, I'm buying it, we're done, right? So I always want to keep that sense of swashbuckling nature to it.
Aaron?
What happens to a legacy game when you don't have the same players play it?
It doesn't work as well. I mean, there's restrictions. I'm still figuring this out, and I'm shocked that I'm here talking about this game 2 years after it came out. I thought it was going to be like a weird footnote, like the, Ballad of Bilbo Baggins or something like that. And so my assumption was, especially with Risk, is that Risk is largely played with mostly the same people most of the time. So that's what I kind of did with that game is, if someone can't make it, it works. If you add someone in for a game, it works. It works ideally with the same number of players every time, and it really doesn't work at all. Like, I see them in a game shop, and it's like, you can just take it down and play it and see what people did before. I think it works as a game. It doesn't work as a narrative, right? You sit down, you're like, what happened here? I don't know. You can see that's all blown up and this guy did something bad, but you don't know why, so you don't get the emotional response that you want. So same thing with SeaFall. Even maybe a little more with SeaFall, and something I'm concerned about is it really does benefit to have the same players play most of the time. But again, it's not a mandate, it's just makes this style of game more appealing. Yep.
When I got the TSR, the thing that stunned me was if it wasn't a rule per se, but they basically said, we want to leave things out of our game so players make it their own. Once they've created a critical hit table or they've decided how the scuba skill should
Right.
they're never going to play another game because it's theirs. I wonder what you think about that. And if you ever leave things incomplete.
I leave things incomplete by accident. Because I assume that I'm going to be there at the house going, oh no, that works that way. And I was up here earlier this morning and some new playtests were like, how does this work? How does this work? And I'm looking back at the rules. I'm like, you're right. It's absolutely unclear. I think it's different. A guy I work for pointed out something. He said, role-playing games don't have rules. They have guidelines. Posing is rules. No one's expected to follow all of them or follow them exactly. They're just something about the covenant of role-playing games where you pick the ones you like and make up the ones you don't. Board games can crash from bad rules, like how does this work? Or you can play it wrong. And I mean, the analogy I make sometimes with board games, it's the only form of entertainment where we ask you to take sort of a reading comprehension test followed by an oral defense before you can start. So the analogy is, if you wanted to hey, I heard there's this new show on Netflix, I want to watch it, and then you have to spend 20 minutes reading and answering questions, and then you get done and you start playing, and because you didn't answer the questions completely right because you're in a hurry, like one guy speaks Spanish and a couple scenes are missing, and you get done and you're like, I don't think I like this show. I don't know. And then your friend's like, did you get to this part? You're like, I didn't get to, I did it wrong, right? So you can do it wrong, but it doesn't crash, it doesn't shut down on you. You finish it wrong. And so there's this great burden with getting the rules right. The problem is, the first time you read rules, and the way most people do it, which is wrong, is let's play this game. And everyone's looking at it and you go, okay, the object's to win, right? And you start, and you can start sweating as you're trying to basically read 3 paragraphs and then put it into 2 sentences. Why don't we just write the 2 sentences? Well, because then it's not enough, because the problem is once you start playing, you're in such a hurry, we got to play, we're wasting time. Once you start playing, people go, how does this work again? Now you don't want 2 sentences, you want 3 paragraphs. Now that you've got your head around the system, you go back and go, Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, we're supposed to move this up and do this here. So it has to be both very brief to get started and very thorough for once you're playing, and it can't be both at the same time. I haven't solved it. I've seen a lot of different intents. I mean, part of Risk Legacy is, and what I'm doing with SeaFall is, here's the basics to get started. We're not going to give you new rules until like game 4, at which point you've mastered these. So now you've got a new set of rules, and you're just integrating it bit by bit by bit.
I think, yeah, it's a really interesting set of problems in the way that that players earn those extra rules. They're no longer hurdles, as you said, that they're sort of yummy things. I've also been inspired by Bernie DeKoven and the New Games movement. He makes the rule explanation into a performance. And I'm always in such a hurry to get people playing. He takes his time. He goes over them again and again and again. He tells jokes. So making that part of the experience, as I think you did in Risk Legacy, is part of the thinking that we have to do. Yes?
I was just curious. I'm really been a big first off. Thank you so much for the trail on House of the Hill. I've been like a sports fair showing to people and going through that similar scenario, reading the instructions, but they like it in the end.
Okay.
So one thing that I've been, when playing it, that I try to think about, is trying to figure out a way to put board games into like a digital medium, like maybe have for example, like a tablet that is like your Android tablet or iPhone, whatever. Put it down on your table and it acts as like the board, and it's digital. And basically having people act as a client, either interacting with the tablet on the table or with their phone. That way, its distribution model is much more efficient and less environmentally impacting. But at the same time, it makes it a little bit easier. Maybe the instructions can kind of help themselves.
Sure. Going digital solves a lot of problems, and there are a lot of people looking at the answer to the digital board game. From what I've seen, and I'm no expert on this, the size of a touchscreen right now, the tablet size, is a little too small to get people drawn in, and you lose something when it goes completely two-dimensional. So people have done pawns that talk to iPads, but they're still too small in this, and client phones, and I think Hasbro even did an iPad version of Scrabble where your phone was the rack, and you could kind of flick the letters off, and they appeared on the screen of the iPad. You know, so you had the other issue with everyone. Certainly, private information is something that's hard to do sometimes in a digital space. How do you give people their own information, but the game still knows that you have it? And so a lot of work's being done there, and it will be solved to have that integration. But yeah, taking the burden of rules and putting it to like a tutorial that doesn't let you go wrong would be great.
Let me just ask a question. Is there anyone that had any problems with Rob's talk that really wants to raise an issue? No? Okay.
Sorry, I was really
talk.
my
Yeah.
mom's here.
Okay.
I love the talk, but my question is...
Next question.
You talked about how because risk was known, that
Yep.
sort of helped as a launching point for the legacy, and people more maybe fit into it the significance of the changes that were happening to the rules and mechanics. So basically the same question is, did you play test Risk Legacy with people who had never played Risk before, and it was just like really different than people who had played Risk before? And in the new game, are you kind of changing the pacing of how new stuff comes out because people might not have such a well-established knowledge of the system?
Yeah. So the answer to the first part of the question is no, because I always assumed this was going to be a hobby market game that said Risk, that at least one person in the group, or probably everyone in the group, had played Risk. So I never played it with non-Risk players because the assumption was that 99% of the final audience would be people who had played at least once or twice. For SeaFall, yeah, I'm more aware. I don't want to give any ability for people to make permanent changes in the early games. It's a much more complicated system. It's kind of like a 4X game, so you could be like spending games without ever doing fighting. Like I'm just trading and exploring and having a good time, and no one attacked me, so you don't really even know the fighting rules until game 3. So I'm being different about how these permanent changes come into play, and the things you find at the beginning. There is some random permanent change in this, which I don't mind, which is if you explore an island, you don't know what you're going to find there. And it's an interesting thing. I'm basically right now, and I don't know if it'll cost out, because costs for me are actually physical costs, not development costs, but I'm creating an advent calendar. Which, yes, that's the reaction that I get from people. Right? So I want you to find something on an island, but I don't want you to know what it is. So I could just do a deck of cards and you draw one and you turn it over and there's a sticker, but you can look through that deck of cards at any point. And even if you don't know what you'll draw, you know what you could draw because you can look at them. So I basically have an advent calendar and they have numbers, and it's like I explored something that was 18, so there's 8 18s here. And you pick one and it just has a sticker on the back and that shows you what you found there. it's completely random. People love it. They're just, which one? Last time I picked the second one down, and that didn't work for me. Like, people, it's amazing this just psychological tics that happen with like gambling and the unknown. So.
Yeah, so the advent calendar example is great because when I was listening to you talk about the stuff you put in Risk Legacy about tearing up cards at the beginning and the packets and stuff, it seems to me like you're designing little rituals almost.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, coming from a more, let's say, traditional board game design background, if you can talk about specific practices that enable you to design these rituals. What's different about designing these rituals as opposed to a typical board game design?
I don't know, maybe because I struggle with mechanics, so I just do stuff that I don't struggle with mechanics. It just takes me longer to get it perfect. I'm very good at fixing other people's mechanics. Here's what you should do. But my own stuff, I always go around in circles. And I didn't set out to create rituals for Legacy. That whole unboxing thing at the end was sort of at an accident, like, because I recognized people didn't know how to start. So I'm like, okay. And I was caught up in narrative, right? The board game doesn't start when you first start the game. The board game starts when you say, I want to play a game. Especially in physical space. I want to play a game. What do we want to play? Let's play this. Oh yeah, I'm going to beat you. Like, you're already playing the game. You got to get the game out and set it up. So the idea is that I'm an experience designer. So what experience do I want people to have? I wanted them to have the experience of high stakes, drama. Oh, this card right here. Yeah, that's not. You like that card. Now it's gone. So, ripping a card is no big deal. Ripping a piece of paper, I could do that all day long. It's creating the idea of that piece of paper is important to someone, and now you're taking it away from them. Boy, I sound like a jerk when I say that, but you know what? It's risk. I just inherited all the anger that goes with it.
We'll put you and Brad in the corner for the evil game designers. Just kidding. I think we can have time for one more question. From the audience. All right, I'm just going to pick someone that hasn't asked yet. Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of a topic of narrative. And one of the big, I think, one of the discussions here has been narrative, like emergent narrative versus elegant game design. And you kind of mentioned before that Risk Legacy is a little all over the place.
Yep.
Mechanics. Do you think the two are kind of opposed? And how do you think the two can really be kind of made friends?
I don't have a clean answer. I haven't thought about enough. I don't think they're opposed. I think you can get wonderful narrative out of sort of elegant, clean game design. I don't think it's as easy. I think the continuum, sometimes when I play some board games, it's just math covered with graphics. And that's for people who really like the system. They don't want anything to get away in the system. That's what appeals to them. Everyone has a different taste. We all like different foods here and different movies and different types of music. And some people they get the enjoyment of understanding a system and solving a system and seeing what that system can do and gaining mastery over it. Anything else that you put on top of it is probably a distraction for them, and they feel like it's chrome or fluff. Other people, of which and I play those games, but the ones that get me here are the ones where I forget about the math and I'm sort of engaging in a narrative both on the board I'm going to say more than both, on the board, in my head, and with my friends, all right? So there's like this 3-part story that's happening here, at which point I want the mechanics to support a story. If the mechanics have to do more or I have to remember something extra, but it results in a better immersive experience for me, I'm going to do it. So I'm actually answering a question that there does seem to be an either or here. I suspect there's not. It's not binary. It's a continuum. You can look at Go at one side, and the rules to role-playing are, as we talked before, like nebulous. I could make up rules to role-playing game right now, and we could be playing. It's about the narrative experience that you're having.
Thank you so much, Rob. Let's give it up for Rob Daviau. Yeah.